Hi everyone, welcome to YouTube. I'm Doug Miles. This video is one of my favorites. It's an interview I did with former Senator Gary Hart about a year and a half ago on my radio show here in Sarasota, prior to a speaking appearance he made in town to talk about his latest book. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon here on YouTube. Well, a great pleasure now to welcome to the Suncoast Magazine the distinguished former senator from the state of Colorado, Gary Hart, who will be in town actually this Wednesday. He'll be speaking over at the Chelsea Center at 7:30. It's part of the forum, which is put together by our friends at Sarasota News and Books. He'll also be doing a book signing for his brand new book, The Courage of Our Convictions, a manifesto for Democrats. And the senator joins us now by telephone. And Senator Hart, it's a great pleasure to meet you by telephone. How are you today?
I'm very well, and thank you very much.
It'll be fun to have you in town. Have you been to Sarasota before, Senator?
I think I was, actually, back in my political campaign years, campaigning in the Florida primary, but that was a long, long time ago. That's right, back in the mid-'80s. And, well, this is a town that the folks love meeting authors, and it's a great book town. So I'm sure you'll have a good audience on Wednesday night to talk about your book, and I'm sure they're very good questions down here. I've been to some of those forums before, so they're going to ask you some good questions, I can guarantee it. I'm looking forward to it.
Having a chance to read your book over the weekend, I enjoyed reading it, and I think it's from the election a couple of weeks ago. We're seeing a definite shift in the power in Washington. First of all, just your thoughts on what happened a couple of weeks ago on Election Day.
Well, the pendulum does go from, if not one extreme to another, at least one party to another. And I think, given the fact that the Republicans had the White House and both houses of Congress, and certain problems resulted, not the least of which are the situation in Iraq and allegations of corruption and so on, which tend to happen, the pendulum came back in the direction of the Democrats. Why I think that makes the book timely is the ball is now in our court, and we not only have to govern, we have to re-identify ourselves, I think, to the electorate, and that's what the challenge of the book represents.
Yeah, just reading through that, and you make the point, which I guess would be the underlying theme throughout it, is that the Democratic Party, if they have any chance to regain the White House and get back the confidence of the public, is to have a particular stand, and they've kind of gotten away from having a particular message, where on the Republican side, you make that point, they've done a great job, whether you agree with it or not, of getting their message out there, right?
Well, I think it's true, and what I do is distinguish between policy, such as health care, environment, energy, and so on, and principles. And what I think needs to be done now is to re-identify the basic principles that distinguish the Democratic Party and make it different from the Republican Party. That's particularly necessary because we went through a period in the 80s and 90s where theory of centrism prevailed, and in some ways that made sense by not being on the far left, which I don't think the party has been for quite some time, but it also blurred the distinctions between the two parties. I think right now, based on just sidewalk polls, people coming up to me, what a lot of independent and undecided voters want is the re-identification of what the Democratic Party stands for, not necessarily in terms of policy, but in terms of principles.
How do you think it got away from that? Any one area where you saw that happen?
I think the consultants that came into politics in America in the 70s and 80s, particularly the 80s and 90s, told Democrats that the country had moved to the right and that we had to kind of abandon the identity which we had in people's minds in order to get votes. And it worked very well for President Clinton, 2 national elections, and some other Democrats. But we paid a price for that. And the price was that in the minds of an awful lot of people who are not familiar with successful Democratic presidents like Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, and Johnson, they began to not understand why there was a difference between the two parties.
You make that point about just those 4 presidents you mentioned, Roosevelt with the New Deal, Johnson with the New Society, and Kennedy with, I guess, getting people involved with volunteerism. Each of them had a particular area where people knew what they stood for and could either get involved with it or not, depending on what they believed on. But it has got away from that, hasn't it?
Well, I think so. We've not had presidents who are leaders who have stated a principle that people could identify. And In the case of the four 20th century presidents, Roosevelt stood for the principle that we are a national community. We're all in this together. And that principle was based on a sense of social justice that got us out of the Great Depression. Harry Truman believed that our security rested in alliances, not in unilateral invasions, and we've lost that principle. We need to get that back. And as you say, John Kennedy resurrected the classic small r Republican ideal from 2,500 years ago that citizens owe a duty of involvement to their nation. And finally, Lyndon Johnson stood for equality and justice. And those are four very distinctive democratic principles and ideals.